He was only 9 when his stepmother locked him in the basement for the first time. No food, no light, just the sound of her heels echoing above him. The neighbors thought she was a saint, beautiful, polite, and charitable. But behind closed doors, she was a monster. What she didn't know was that someone, or something, was watching. A German shepherd chained outside saw everything. And one day, when the boy's screams grew silent, that dog broke free. What happened next would shock the entire community. And years later, a black female billionaire would uncover the horrifying truth that everyone tried to bury. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Rain lashed against the narrow windows of the small wooden house, each drop sounding like a warning. David sat hunched near the door, his thin arms wrapped tightly around Max, the only friend who never raised a hand against him. The dim light of the single bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the cracked floorboards. His stepmother, Linda, was upstairs, pacing back and forth, her voice slurred from another night of cheap whiskey. "Don't make a sound," David whispered into Max's ear, his voice trembling. The dog gave a low whine, pressing closer, his wet nose nuzzling the boy's arm. The silence between each creak of the old house was unbearable. Every noise carried a threat. Every breath risked punishment. David's father had been gone for months. "Business trip," Linda said. But deep down, David knew the truth. His father wasn't coming back. The man who used to promise safety had abandoned him to the cruelty of a woman whose eyes burned with resentment. Dinner that night was the same as every other. Cold soup, a few stale pieces of bread, and words sharper than any blade. "You think that dog's gonna save you, huh?" Linda sneered, slamming her glass onto the table. "Maybe I should get rid of him so you learn to behave." David froze. His heart thundered. "Please don't hurt Max," he whispered. Her laughter was sharp, almost gleeful. "Then keep your mouth shut." When she finally stumbled upstairs, David exhaled, trembling. He pulled Max close, burying his face into the dog's thick fur. The scent of rain and safety filled his senses. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, distant, foreboding. Miles away, in a glass tower overlooking New York City, Sarah Monroe stared blankly at the news playing on her massive screen. The headline flashed, "Local boy reported missing after neighbors hear screams." Her heart skipped. Something about the picture of that frightened boy felt painfully familiar. The dark eyes, the bruised expression, the silent plea for help. She pressed her fingers against her temples, a migraine building behind her eyes. Memories she had buried years ago began clawing their way back. The sound of breaking glass, the echo of her own screams as a child, the image of her mother's hand raised in anger. Sarah had built an empire out of pain, transforming every wound into wealth, every scar into power. But that night, she felt powerless again. Her assistant, Emma, entered quietly. "Ma'am, you asked me to gather the reports on child welfare cases in rural counties." Sarah turned, her voice distant. "Yes, start with this one." She pointed at the boy's photo. "Find him." In that moment, Sarah didn't know why she cared. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fate. But deep down, she sensed that saving this boy might be the only way to save herself. Back in the small house, the wind tore at the shutters. David had finally drifted into a half-sleep beside Max when a sudden noise snapped him awake. Creak. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming down the stairs. David's breath caught. Max's ears shot up, his body tensing. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then came a whisper. Hoarse, trembling, unmistakably human. "David, run!" And then, a crash. The light went out. The house plunged into darkness. For a brief, breathless moment, everything was silent except for the pounding of rain on the roof and the frantic rhythm of David's heartbeat. "David! Run!" The whisper echoed again, weaker this time, almost swallowed by the storm outside. Max barked once, low, warning, protective. His fur bristled. The boy could feel the animal's muscles tighten under his trembling hand. "Who's there?" David's voice cracked. "Mom?" No answer. Only the sound of the wind howling through a broken pane. Then, a sudden thud upstairs, a muffled cry. David's instinct screamed at him to stay still, but another part of him, a small, brave flicker, pushed him forward. He had to move. He had to see. He crept toward the staircase, Max following close, paws silent on the creaking floor. The air smelled of rain and something else. Metallic. Sharp. Blood. "Mom!" he called again. But this time, it wasn't a question. It was fear dressed as hope. Lightning flashed, illuminating the narrow staircase. For a split second, David saw it. Something sprawled on the top step. A shadow. A shape. Linda. She was motionless, her face pale and twisted, eyes open but unseeing. Beside her lay a broken bottle, shards glinting in the flickering light. David's breath caught. He stumbled backward, nearly falling. Max barked again, this time louder, his growl deep and guttural. Then, another sound. The back door creaked open. Wind roared in, carrying rain and the faint smell of gasoline. A figure stood in the doorway, cloaked in a long coat, face hidden beneath a dripping hood. David froze. The figure stepped forward, boots splashing on the wet floor. A man's voice, low, rough, cut through the storm. "You need to come with me," Max growled, placing himself between David and the stranger. The man raised both hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you, kid. But if you stay, she won't be the last one to fall." His voice trembled, a hint of urgency in it. David stared at him, eyes wide. "Who are you?" The man hesitated. "A friend of your father's. He asked me to keep you safe. My father's dead." The man's expression changed, something between regret and truth untold. "Not yet, but he's in danger. And so are you." Lightning struck again, the thunder so loud it shook the walls. The boy looked up the stairs once more. Linda's lifeless eyes seemed to follow him, accusing, pleading. Max barked again, as if urging him to decide. David's small hand trembled, reaching for Max's collar. "Okay," he whispered. "We'll go." The stranger nodded once, turning toward the door. "Stay close." They ran into the storm, rain slicing through the darkness, wind whipping their faces. Behind them, the house groaned under the weight of thunder. A faint orange glow flickered through the window. The scent of gasoline grew stronger. And then, the explosion. The shockwave threw them both to the ground. Max yelped, but quickly scrambled up, pressing his body against David to shield him from the heat. David turned, eyes wide with horror, as flames consumed the house that had been his prison. The stranger pulled him to his feet. "No looking back," he said. "Not tonight." Far away in her penthouse suite, Sarah Monroe jolted awake from a nightmare she couldn't explain. Her heart raced, her skin damp with sweat. She had seen it. The same boy, the same fire, the same eyes staring at her through the smoke. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, Emma. "Ma'am, we found a lead on the missing boy, but you won't believe who's connected to his case." Sarah's fingers hovered over the screen. "Who?" "His father. Used to work for your foundation." Outside her window, lightning split the sky over Manhattan. Sarah rose from bed, her reflection in the glass staring back like a ghost of who she used to be. "Find him," she whispered. And far away in the rain-soaked darkness, a boy and his dog stumbled into the unknown, carrying with them the spark of a story that would soon expose the darkest truth of all. A single flash of light illuminated the road ahead. In it, David saw something shining half buried in the mud. A silver pendant, engraved with a name he didn't recognize. He picked it up. The name read, Sarah Monroe. Rain dripped from the trees like tears as dawn began to creep across the horizon. The fire that had devoured the house was now a smoldering ruin behind them, black smoke twisting into the pale sky. David's clothes were soaked and heavy, his small hands clutching the silver pendant he'd found in the mud. "Keep moving," the stranger said, his voice low but firm. "We're not safe yet." David glanced up at him. "You never told me your name." The man hesitated before answering. "Call me Mark." Mark moved with practiced precision, eyes scanning the forest with a soldier's awareness. His coat was torn, his face scarred, and though his expression was hard, there was something in his tone, something that made David trust him, at least for now. "Who was she?" David asked quietly. "My stepmom." Why did that happen?" Mark's jaw tightened. Sometimes evil doesn't need a reason. He paused, glancing down at the pendant in the boy's hand. "Where did you get that?" "I found it outside, before the fire." Mark froze. He took a slow step closer, eyes narrowing as he studied the engraved letters. "Sarah Monroe," he read aloud. "Where did you say you found this?" "I didn't," David said softly. "It was just there." Mark looked out toward the smoke rising over the trees. His mind was racing. "That pendant doesn't belong anywhere near here." David frowned. "Do you know her?" Mark didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulling out a crumpled photograph, one showing a man with kind eyes and a tired smile. "Do you know who this is?" David's breath caught. "That's my dad." Mark nodded slowly. "Your father worked for Sarah Monroe, years ago, before everything went wrong." David looked down at the pendant again, his reflection distorted in the polished surface. Why would something of hers be here? Mark's eyes darkened. "Because what happened to your family isn't an accident. It's part of something much bigger." Meanwhile, New York City. Sarah Monroe stood at the window of her high-rise office, the city sprawling beneath her like a web of glass and light. She held her own pendant in her hand, an identical silver piece, engraved with her initials. Her reflection stared back at her, haunted. Emma entered quietly, holding a tablet. "We've traced the boy's father, Jonathan Hale. He disappeared 3 months ago after exposing a financial leak in one of your charity branches. Funds rerouted to private accounts offshore." Sarah turned sharply. "That's impossible. Every dollar is accounted for." Emma hesitated. "It's not your doing, ma'am. Someone inside your foundation was laundering money, using your name." Jonathan tried to stop them, but before he could deliver evidence, he vanished. The last communication from him mentioned a woman named Linda. Sarah's chest tightened. "His wife." Emma nodded grimly. "And one more thing. The last GPS ping from Jonathan's phone was near a small town in Virginia, the same place where that house burned down last night." Sarah's hand trembled. "Then the boy—" "Yes," Emma said softly. "He's Jonathan's son." Sarah closed her eyes, a rush of guilt flooding through her. Her foundation, her name, had somehow become part of the darkness that destroyed that child's life. "Prepare the jet," she said finally. "I'm going there myself." Emma blinked. "Ma'am, are you sure? It could be dangerous." Sarah turned, eyes cold and resolute. "I've spent my whole life building walls around pain. Maybe it's time I walk straight into it." Back in the forest, they had walked for hours. David's legs ached, his breath visible in the cold air. Mark led them along an old service road toward what looked like an abandoned cabin. "This will do for now," Mark said, pushing open the creaking door. Inside, it smelled of dust and pine. Cobwebs hung like curtains, but there was a fireplace, dry wood, and a chance to rest. David sank down beside Max, who curled protectively around him. Mark knelt to start a fire, the flame flickering to life in the hearth. For the first time in days, warmth returned to the room. "Why are you helping me?" David asked quietly. Mark stared into the flames. "Because once, someone helped me when no one else would." David watched him for a long moment. Then slowly, he held out the pendant. "It's hers, isn't it? Sarah Monroe." Mark nodded, his face unreadable. "Yes. And if that pendant found its way to you, it means she's already looking." David tilted his head. "Looking for what?" Mark's answer was barely a whisper. "The truth." Outside, the wind picked up again. The trees groaned and bent under its force. Then, somewhere in the distance, Max's ears perked. A sound, soft but distinct, echoed through the forest. The low hum of an approaching engine. Mark moved to the window, peering through the glass. His eyes narrowed. "It's too soon," he muttered. "They found us." David's pulse quickened. "Who?" Mark turned, his voice sharp and urgent. "Grab the dog. We're leaving now." David snatched the pendant, shoving it into his pocket. The boy and his dog followed Mark out the back door into the misty morning, just as the first vehicle rolled into view, a black SUV with tinted windows and no plates. The door opened. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a photo in one hand and a gun in the other. And on that photo, David's face stared back at him. The forest was no longer silent. Engines rumbled in the distance, low, predatory sounds that grew louder with each passing second. The morning mist thickened, swallowing everything in a cold, gray shroud. "Run!" Mark hissed, grabbing David's hand. Max barked once and took the lead, darting into the trees. Branches whipped at their faces as they sprinted through the undergrowth. Behind them, men shouted, their voices sharp and professional. Whoever they were, they moved like soldiers, coordinated, efficient, and relentless. David's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. "Who are they?" he gasped. "People who don't want you to talk," Mark said grimly. "Or live long enough to." Gunfire cracked through the forest. Bark splintered off the trees beside them. Max snarled, tugging David toward a narrow path hidden beneath a fallen pine. "Go!" Mark shouted. "Stay low!" They slid down a muddy slope, landing beside a shallow creek. The cold water bit into David's skin, but he didn't stop. He followed Mark downstream, breath ragged, until the sounds behind them faded into the storm. When they finally stopped, David collapsed to his knees, gasping. Max pressed against him, licking his hand as if to reassure him that he was still there, still alive. Mark knelt beside him, scanning the trees. "We've bought some time, but they'll regroup soon." David clutched the pendant hanging around his neck. "Why do they want me?" Mark hesitated. "Because your father found something he wasn't supposed to. Evidence that someone inside Sarah Monroe's foundation was funding illegal operations, smuggling, money laundering, and worse. But Sarah Monroe's good," David protested. "She helps people." Mark gave a grim smile. "That's what she believes. But when power grows, so do the shadows behind it." He looked away, jaw tight. "Your dad discovered a file that could destroy powerful people. He was trying to send it to Monroe before he vanished." David stared at the pendant, realization dawning. Then maybe this is connected. Before Mark could reply, Max's ears shot up. He barked sharply, 3 times. Warning. Mark's eyes narrowed. "They're back." He grabbed David's arm, pulling him toward a rocky hill. "Come on, there's an old ranger outpost up there. We can use it to send a signal." They climbed in silence, their breath misting in the cold air. Behind them, faint voices echoed again. Closer this time. At the top of the ridge, a small wooden structure came into view. Half collapsed, its roof caved in by years of storms. "This'll have to do." Mark muttered. He pushed open the door, revealing an old radio covered in dust and cobwebs. He brushed it off, twisted the knobs, and after a few minutes, static crackled through the room. "Come on," he muttered. "Work." David stood by the window, clutching Max's fur. Through the fog, he saw shadows moving. 3 men, black jackets, rifles. "Mark," he whispered. "I see them?" Mark adjusted the frequency one last time and pressed the mic button. "This is Mark Dalton, former security contractor. If anyone can hear me, I have the Hale boy. Repeat. David Hale is alive. We need extraction immediately." A pause. Then faintly through the static. "This is Sarah Monroe." Mark's eyes widened. "Stay where you are. I'm coming for the boy." David turned toward him, breath trembling. "She found us?" Mark gave a faint smile. "Seems your miracle billionaire's real after all." But before they could respond, a bullet shattered the radio. "Down!" Mark shouted, shoving David behind an overturned table. Glass rained down as gunfire tore through the wooden walls. Max barked fiercely, teeth bared, standing guard in front of the boy. "Mark!" David cried. "What do we do?" Mark's hand went to his side. Blood seeped through his shirt. He grimaced. "You run, kid. Take the dog and go north. Follow the creek until you see a red barn. Someone there owes me a favor." "No." David shook his head, eyes wide. "I'm not leaving you." "Listen to me," Mark said, voice weakening. "You have something they want, proof your father died for. You can still make it mean something." A shadow loomed outside the doorway. Heavy boots crunched on wet wood. Mark raised his gun with shaking hands. "Go." David hesitated for a heartbeat, long enough to see Mark's eyes, fierce even through the pain. Then he turned, grabbing Max and running through the back door into the fog. The last thing he heard was a gunshot. And then silence. At that same moment, miles away, Sarah Monroe's jet sliced through gray skies as she stared at the message replaying in her mind. "This is Mark Dalton. David Hale is alive." Alive. After everything. After the reports, the fire, the lies, he was alive. Emma's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, the coordinates are in the Appalachian woods. The area's heavily restricted. Are you sure you want to go in alone?" Sarah looked out the window, her reflection fractured by the clouds. "Alone is how I started. Alone is how I'll end this." She closed her fingers around her pendant, the twin of the one now hanging around David's neck, and whispered to herself, "Hold on, David. I'm coming." Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the storm below. 2 paths about to collide, 2 stories about to become one. And somewhere in the foggy forest, David stumbled through the mud with Max at his side, clutching the pendant that would soon uncover the darkest truth of all. Behind him, the wind carried a faint, haunting whisper. His father's voice. "Trust the woman with the silver light." David froze. The pendant in his hand pulsed, just once, faintly glowing. The forest breathed in whispers. Every leaf, every shadow seemed alive, carrying echoes of the past and secrets too heavy for the dawn to hold. David stumbled through the mud, Max close at his side. His breath came in sharp bursts, chest burning, heart thundering against the thin fabric of his soaked shirt. He had no idea how long he'd been running. Minutes, maybe hours. The rain had faded into a mist, but fear clung to him like a second skin. "Easy, boy," he murmured, resting a trembling hand on Max's head. The German shepherd's ears were alert, nose twitching, guiding him forward. The pendant around David's neck still pulsed faintly, soft flashes of light, silver and strange, like a heartbeat, not his own. It was the only thing cutting through the gray fog. He remembered his father's voice again. "Trust the woman with the silver light." "Who is she?" David whispered. But even saying the words sent a shiver down his spine. At the same time, deep in the woods, miles away, Sarah Monroe's SUV bounced over the muddy trail, headlights slicing through the mist. She sat in the passenger seat, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion that painted her face. "Ms. Monroe," her driver said carefully, "local authorities advise against entering this area. There's been a fire, possible homicide." "I know what happened," she interrupted softly. "And I know who's behind it." She gripped her pendant, feeling its familiar weight against her chest. It had been a gift. One of two. Jonathan Hale had given it to her years ago, back when they worked together to build her foundation. Back when trust still meant something. She had trusted him with her company's integrity, her vision, maybe even her heart. And now, the other pendant, the twin, was in his son's hands. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Jonathan, what did you leave behind?" The driver slowed. "Ma'am, we're here. This is the coordinate." The vehicle stopped beside an old ranger station, burned and half collapsed. Smoke still curled from the wreckage. Sarah stepped out, her boots sinking into wet earth. The smell of ash and gunpowder hit her instantly. Her chest tightened. "Someone fought here," she murmured. Her driver glanced around nervously. "You think the boy—" "He's alive," she said, almost instinctively. "He has to be." And then she saw it. Prints in the mud, small footprints beside larger ones, and paw marks. "Follow the dog," she whispered. "They always know where to go." Back with David. The forest thinned, giving way to a wide clearing. In the distance stood an old red barn, just like Mark had said. Its paint peeled, its doors barely hanging on, but to David, it was hope. "We made it," he breathed, voice hoarse. Max barked softly, tail wagging once, then froze. His nose lifted, his body stiffened. David followed his gaze, and froze. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and composed, her dark coat fluttering behind her like a shadow. The faint light caught her skin, her steady eyes, and the silver pendant glinting against her chest. The same pendant. David's breath hitched. "You." Sarah stopped several feet away, her gaze softening as she saw the boy. "David," she said quietly, "you're safe now." Max growled low, uncertain. Sarah knelt, slowly extending a hand. "It's okay, Max. I know your father. Jonathan Hale." David's eyes widened. "You knew him?" She nodded, emotion flickering across her usually unreadable face. "He worked for me. He was more than an employee. He was my friend. He believed in something good, something pure. And he died, trying to protect it." David clutched the pendant around his neck. He said, "To trust the woman with the silver light." Sarah's eyes filled with tears she hadn't allowed herself in years. "Then he knew I'd come for you." The boy stepped closer, hesitantly, like someone walking out of a nightmare. Max finally relaxed, tail lowering. Sarah smiled faintly, though sorrow lingered in her expression. "You have his eyes," she whispered. "The same fire." David looked down. "Everyone I love gets hurt." Sarah crouched in front of him, her tone firm but kind. "No, David, not this time. I promise you that." For a moment, the world was still. Only the whisper of wind through the trees remained. Then a low rumble broke the calm. Engines again, this time closer. Sarah's head snapped toward the sound. "They found us." David clutched her hand. "Mark said they were after me because of something my dad found." Sarah's expression hardened. "And now they know I'm with you." A shot rang out, sharp, echoing through the clearing. "Down!" Sarah pulled him behind an overturned tractor as bullets tore through the air. Max barked, lunging forward, protecting them both. Sarah drew a compact pistol from her coat. "Stay here," she ordered, eyes cold with fury. "I've dealt with men like this before." Through the fog, dark figures emerged again, 3 of them, weapons raised, moving in formation. "David," she said urgently, "there's a hidden cellar under the barn. Get inside. I'll find you when it's safe." He hesitated. "I can't leave you," You can, she said softly, gripping his shoulder. Because this time, someone's fighting for you. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from memory. For years, she had used her billions to shield others, to fix what couldn't be fixed in herself. But here, now, saving this boy wasn't charity. It was redemption. David nodded, tears mixing with the rain. Come back. Sarah gave a faint smile. Always. As he and Max darted toward the barn, Sarah turned to face the fog. The men approached cautiously, unaware they were stepping into the sights of a woman who had spent her life surviving wolves in suits. You picked the wrong orphan, she whispered, raising her weapon. The forest erupted with thunder. Inside the barn, David and Max descended into the cellar, finding old shelves and dusty crates. He curled into a corner, clutching the pendant tight. Through the floorboards, he could hear distant gunfire, muffled shouts, and then silence. He waited, breath shallow, until footsteps echoed above him. 1, 2, slow, heavy. Max growled softly. Then came a voice, a familiar one. David, it's me. He froze. It wasn't Sarah. It was deeper, raspier. He knew that voice. Dad? The single word slipped from David's lips like a prayer. Dad? The silence that followed was heavy, thick, with disbelief. Max stood tense beside him, fur bristling, as if even he didn't trust the voice coming from above. Footsteps creaked again on the barn floor, slow, deliberate. Dust drifted from the cracks in the ceiling. David, the voice said softly. It's me. It's okay. You can come out now. The boy's heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. He wanted to believe it, to believe that his father had somehow survived the fire, the betrayal, everything. But something in the tone, off by a fraction, filled him with unease. Prove it, David whispered. A pause. Then the voice replied. When you were 5, you wanted to name the dog Captain Thunder. I told you that was too long, so you called him Max instead. David's eyes went wide. Nobody else knew that. Nobody but his dad. Come on, son, the voice urged. It's safe. Max gave a low growl. David hesitated, every instinct screaming at him not to move. But then he heard it. Another sound from above. A woman's voice. David, stay where you are. It was Sarah. The next instant erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouts, splintering wood. David ducked, covering his ears as bullets ripped through the barn walls. He could hear Sarah yelling commands, the sound of metal hitting metal. Get to the boy, someone barked. Take him alive. The trapdoor above burst open. Rough hands reached down, grabbing at him. Max lunged, teeth sinking into the attacker's wrist. The man howled, jerking back, and in that moment, David scrambled away, clutching the pendant tight. Sarah, he screamed. Hold on, I'm coming. Sarah crashed through the side door, firing 2 precise shots. The first man fell instantly. The second dropped his weapon, clutching his leg. She turned to David, breathless. You okay? He nodded shakily. Max barked, still on alert. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the barn, another figure emerged. Tall. Lean. The face hidden by a hood. Sarah raised her weapon again, but froze. Sarah, the man said softly. Don't. The voice stopped her cold. Her gun lowered slightly, disbelief washing over her. Jonathan? She whispered. He stepped into the light. His face was gaunt, scarred, but unmistakable. The man she'd mourned for months, the man she thought was dead, stood before her. David stared, eyes wide, tears welling. Dad! Jonathan looked at his son, and for the briefest moment, all the years of pain vanished. He knelt, arms opening. David! The boy ran to him, clutching him tightly. Sarah felt her own throat tighten. It was real. He was alive. But even in the warmth of that embrace, something felt wrong. Jonathan's hands trembled. His eyes darted toward the barn door. then to the forest beyond. "Jonathan," Sarah said quietly, "you're supposed to be dead." "I had to be," he replied. "For him. For you." "What happened?" she demanded. "Why fake your death?" He sighed, the weight of secrets pressing down on every word. "I uncovered something inside your foundation, an entire operation using your charity to fund black market experiments. They were laundering money through child welfare programs, Sarah. I tried to stop them. And they came after you," she finished. Jonathan nodded. "They killed my wife when she found out. I barely escaped. I've been running ever since." David's face twisted in confusion. "But Mark said..." "He said you sent him." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Mark was supposed to protect you until I could come back. If he's gone..." He closed his eyes briefly. "Then they're closer than I thought." Sarah took a step forward, eyes sharp. "Who's behind it, Jonathan? Who's pulling the strings?" He hesitated, then looked straight at her. "Someone you trust." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the sound of another engine echoed outside. Multiple vehicles this time. Headlights pierced through the mist, sweeping across the barn. Jonathan grabbed David's hand. "They found us again. We need to move." Sarah stepped between them. "You're hurt, Jonathan. Let me handle this. You get him out." He shook his head. "No, you don't understand. They don't just want him. They want you. You're the only one who can expose them." A bullet shattered a window, then another. "Move!" Sarah shouted. They sprinted toward the back of the barn, Max bounding ahead. The world erupted behind them in gunfire and smoke. They reached the tree line just as a spotlight swept the clearing. Jonathan stumbled, clutching his side. Sarah grabbed his arm. "Stay with me," she urged. He managed a weak smile. "Always were stubborn." They reached a small ravine and ducked behind fallen branches. David clung to his father's sleeve, trembling. In the distance, men shouted orders. The forest blazed with flashlights. Sarah pressed her hand against Jonathan's wound, blood dark and warm beneath her fingers. "We need to get you help." He coughed, shaking his head. "No hospitals. They'll find me." His gaze flicked to David. "Listen to me. You have to take him to the safe house, north of the ridge. There's a drive hidden there. It has everything, names, accounts, proof." Sarah's brow furrowed. "And what about you?" He gave a sad, almost peaceful smile. "My part's over." David gripped his father's hand desperately. "No, you can't leave me again." Jonathan brushed his hair back gently. "You're stronger than you think, David. Remember what I told you, light doesn't die, it just finds a new place to shine." A single tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. "I'll protect him, I swear it." Jonathan nodded weakly. "I know you will. You always did." And then, before another word could pass between them, gunfire ripped through the trees. Jonathan shoved David aside, taking the bullet meant for him. Sarah fired back, dropping the shooter instantly, but when she turned, Jonathan was already falling, his blood staining the leaves crimson. "Dad!" David screamed, dropping to his knees. Jonathan's hand found his son's, gripping weakly. "Live, David," he whispered, "and trust her." Then the hand went still. Sarah felt something shatter deep inside her, a soundless breaking that no amount of money or redemption could fix. She looked at the boy, his face streaked with tears, clutching his father's hand. "We have to go," she said, voice shaking. "If we stay, he died for nothing." David didn't move at first. Then slowly, he nodded. As they slipped into the darkness with Max leading the way, Sarah cast one last glance back. Through the mist, Jonathan's pendant glimmered faintly, silver light reflecting from the moon above. The same silver light that now pulsed softly against David's chest. The night swallowed them whole as Sarah, David, and Max moved through the forest. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world quiet. Too quiet. Every step they took felt like walking through the memory of what had just happened. Jonathan's death still clung to the air, heavy and raw. David's eyes were red, but no tears fell now. He walked in silence, clutching the pendant as though it were the last piece of his father left in the world. Sarah kept a hand on his shoulder, guiding him along the narrow path Jonathan had mentioned. Her mind spun in relentless circles, images of Jonathan alive, then falling, replaying like a wound that refused to close. She had spent years saving strangers, but couldn't save the one man who once saved her. "Sarah?" David's voice was small. "Yes? Did my dad really die for this?" He lifted the pendant slightly. "For what's inside it?" Sarah's gaze softened. "He didn't die for what's inside. He died for who it could save." They walked until the forest began to thin. The first light of dawn crept over the hills, casting everything in pale silver. Ahead, half hidden behind ivy and thyme, stood an old stone cottage. The safe house. Sarah exhaled, relief and dread intertwining in her chest. "We're here." She pushed open the warped door. Inside, dust motes danced in a single beam of morning light. It was quiet. Too quiet. But something about the place felt deliberate. Safe. Prepared. David stepped inside, Max following close. "It's like he lived here," the boy murmured, running his fingers along a table covered in maps, notebooks, and a single metal case. Sarah crossed the room, flipping the latch. Inside lay a small black hard drive, marked only with a silver engraving. Project Angel. "Angel," she whispered. That was his code name for his clean energy initiative. David frowned. "But that's good, isn't it?" Sarah hesitated. It was. Until someone turned it into something else. She connected the drive to her tablet, the screen flickering to life. Folders appeared. Encrypted, protected. Jonathan had left a digital labyrinth only she could navigate. "Dad said you could fix things," David whispered. "That you see light where no one else does." Sarah's throat tightened. "He used to say that when we were younger." She entered a passcode. Hale 02. The folders opened. Lines of text and financial records scrolled across the screen, but one file caught her attention. Angel DNA Trials. Her stomach turned. She opened it. Photos. Documents. Names. Children. Their ages, locations, medical conditions, all under the label of her own foundation. Money had been funneled from her charity's healthcare grants into illegal genetic experiments. Biotech testing on orphans in developing countries. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her hand trembling. David looked up, confused. "What is it?" She could barely find the words. "They weren't just stealing money, David. They were stealing lives." David stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. His father's name appeared in the logs, flagged as a security risk. "He found out," Sarah said softly. He tried to shut it down. David's eyes filled with pain and fury. "They killed him for it." Sarah clenched her fists. "Not all of them. Some of these names are still alive, and one of them runs my company." At that same moment, New York City, inside the glass fortress of Monroe Industries, Emma sat alone in Sarah's office. The city below glittered, oblivious to the storm brewing above it. She stared at a secure line flashing red on her tablet, an incoming encrypted message. "Project Angel compromised. The boy is alive. Monroe with him. Execute cleanup." Emma's lips tightened. She rose from Sarah's chair, her reflection mirrored in the window. Composed, immaculate, utterly cold. "I warned you, Sarah," she murmured. "You dig too deep, and you'll drown in what you find." She turned off the lights and slipped the phone into her coat pocket. The city lights reflected in her eyes like flames. Back at the safe house, Sarah transferred the files to a backup drive. "This is enough to bring them down." she said quietly. "But we'll have to move fast. Once they realize we've accessed it, they'll come." David looked at her with weary determination. "Then we don't stop." Sarah met his gaze. The boy who had been terrified, beaten, and abandoned was gone. In his place stood someone who carried courage like a scar, quiet, but unbreakable. "You remind me of your father," she said. "He never stopped fighting either." Max gave a low growl suddenly, turning toward the window. His fur bristled. Sarah froze. "What is it?" "Headlights, 3 of them, cutting through the dawn fog." "They're here," she whispered. David's grip tightened around the pendant. "Sarah?" She moved to the table, sliding the hard drive into a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. "No matter what happens," she said, her voice steady, "you keep that pendant safe. It's the key to everything." The engines outside shut off. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Sarah drew her weapon, her pulse calm, eyes sharp. "They want a war," she murmured. "Then they'll get one." The first knock echoed through the house, soft, polite, mocking. Then came a voice. "Sarah Monroe," it called sweetly. "It's been a while." Sarah froze. She knew that voice. It was Emma. The sound of the knock lingered in the air like the ticking of a clock counting down to destruction. "Sarah Monroe," Emma's voice called again, soft, almost friendly, but beneath it was steel. "You always did love hiding in places that made you look noble. Forest cabins, orphanages, press conferences about saving the world. But tell me, how does it feel now, when the world you built is burning from the inside?" Sarah took a quiet breath. She motioned to David. "Go to the cellar. Don't come out until I say." "But, David," she said firmly, eyes never leaving the door. "Do as I say." He hesitated, then nodded. "Come back." "I will," she whispered. Max followed him as the boy slipped through the trap door beneath the rug. When it shut, Sarah was alone. Except for the ghost of the man she'd loved and the shadow of the friend who had betrayed her. The door creaked open. Emma stepped inside, heels clicking against the old floorboards. Her black coat shimmered faintly with rain. She held no visible weapon, just a calm smile and eyes that gleamed like sharpened glass. "Still dramatic as ever," Emma said, looking around. "Jonathan always said you had a flair for the cinematic." "Don't say his name," Sarah warned. Emma raised a brow. "Why not? He was one of us, after all. Until he decided to play the hero." Sarah leveled her gun. "He died protecting his son." Emma smiled faintly. "And you're about to die protecting a lie." Sarah's finger twitched on the trigger. "You turned Project Angel into a graveyard for children. You took what was supposed to heal the world and used it to build a weapon." Emma's voice dropped, calm but cutting. "You think I wanted that? You think I didn't believe in what we started? But when the investors came, when the politicians demanded results, we had to evolve. You were too naive to understand. Purity doesn't fund progress." "You call it progress?" Sarah spat. "You tortured kids." Emma's expression flickered, a crack in her composure. "Do you think I don't see them in my dreams, Sarah? Their faces?" Her voice hardened. "But we were building a new era, disease-free, pain-free, hunger gone. You wanted salvation. I gave the world evolution." Sarah shook her head slowly. "You gave it monsters." Emma took a step forward, her calm unraveling. "You always thought you were better than me, the billionaire savior, the golden woman of mercy. But you built the system, Sarah. I just used it." Sarah's jaw clenched. "You don't get to rewrite history, not this time." Emma sighed. "Then I suppose this is goodbye." Her hand flicked subtly, and the room exploded with light and sound. Flash grenades. Sarah dove behind the table as glass shattered. The roar of gunfire followed, Emma's men swarming the cabin. She fired back, taking 2 down in precise, silent bursts. "Secure the drive," Emma shouted. Too late, Sarah muttered, ducking behind the stone hearth. A figure lunged at her. She swung the butt of her pistol, striking his jaw with a sickening crack. The man dropped, unconscious. From the cellar below, Max barked, furious, protective. David's muffled voice called, "Sarah!" She turned toward the trapdoor, just as one of Emma's guards spotted it. "No!" she shouted, firing twice. The guard fell inches away from the door. "Sarah!" Emma's voice rang out again, closer now. "You can't protect him forever. They'll hunt him until he's nothing but a file number." Sarah rose slowly, gun trained on the doorway where Emma stood, smoke curling behind her, like the wings of some fallen angel. "Maybe," Sarah said, "but they'll never find you either." For a moment, the two women just stared at each other, mirror images of ambition gone opposite ways. Then Emma smiled sadly. "You always believed in miracles." Sarah's eyes flicked toward the pendant around her neck, the same symbol Jonathan had carved. "I still do." She fired. The bullet struck the fuel tank by the fireplace. The explosion ripped through the room, flames bursting upward like a storm of light. Sarah dove toward the cellar, throwing it open. "Go, David, run!" she shouted. David scrambled up, eyes wide in horror. "Sarah!" She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the back door as fire devoured the walls. Behind them, Emma staggered, her coat ablaze. For a brief instant, their eyes met through the fire. "Save him!" Emma rasped. "Finish what we started!" And then she fell, swallowed by the flames. Hours later, sunrise. The world was silent again. Smoke rose in the distance where the cabin had been. Sarah and David sat on a hill overlooking the valley, the drive clutched in her hands. "It's all gone," he whispered. "Not everything," Sarah said softly. "We still have the truth." He looked at her, eyes filled with grief and something stronger. Hope. "What will you do now?" Sarah gazed at the horizon, where dawn painted the sky in gold. "Expose them, every last one, and then we start over." She handed him the pendant. "Your father wanted you to have this. He said light doesn't die, it just finds a new place to shine." David held it tightly, eyes glimmering. "Then maybe we can be that light." Sarah smiled faintly. "Maybe we already are." Max lay beside them, head resting on David's knee, tail flicking once as if in agreement. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the weight lift, just enough to breathe again. Somewhere deep inside, she could almost hear Jonathan's voice. "You did good, Sarah. You brought him home." And as the sun rose higher, cutting through the last of the night, Sarah Monroe and the boy who had survived the dark began walking toward a new day, where redemption wasn't a word, but a promise kept.